Welcome to Running in the 70s, where we interview, meet, and get to know athletes of all kind who were running in the 70s. I'm your host, Matthew Kleinowski. Hi, we're back with Len Krichko, who had a career at several universities and afterwards an amazing life. Let's get back to it with Len. Len, let's talk about what happened with your running career after Allegheny.
I ended up being recruited by a lot of D1 schools. West Virginia was one of them. Coach Bill McClure flew up to Pittsburgh from LSU. He was a small man. He had a cowboy suit on with fringe, a Stetson cowboy hat, and had these Stetson boots with silver tips on them. Came in to Coach Cohen's office. Coach Cohen said, "Len, Coach McClure would like to meet you." I walked in and I saw this cowboy looking at me, and Bill McClure says, "I would like you to come down to LSU for a visit, and I want you to be one of my guys and to lead our middle distance runners into the future." I said, "Coach McClure, I'm very honored that you think about me in your recruiting, but I have no interest in going to LSU. And it's nothing against you, but that's far away from my home in Western Pennsylvania. I can't." He opened up his suit jacket and said, "I have first class airfare for you, round trip ticket. You could come at any time. It's an open ticket." I said, "Coach McClure would be doing a great disservice to you in the university if I accepted that, because I know all it would be was a mini vacation for me with no intention for running for you. But I will think about some other runners that possibly could run for you, and I will call you. But, sir, thank you, but no thank you." He was highly disappointed. He later became a U.S. Olympic track coach. And at some points in my psyche, Matt, I've often wondered, what a dumb idiot. Maybe I should have taken him up on the offer. I got recruited with three of my teammates to Clemson University: Bill Stewart, Tim Fry, George Vogel. Tim and Bill were from Winchester, Virginia. They were state champions in high school, All-Americans at the JUCO level for distance running. George Vogel out of New York was a miler. The Clemson coach came after all four of us and really put the pressure on me by signing with the other three and guaranteeing all four of us a full scholarship if we all agreed to come to Clemson. I ended up going to Clemson, set 5 school records at Clemson within the 1 year: distance medley indoors, 2-mile relay indoors, the 2-mile relay outdoors, 1,000 yards indoors, and 1,000 meters. I think my 1,000 meter is still the third fastest in Clemson history to this day. At Allegheny, George and I were part of our distance medley relay, which set a national American record for the JUCO. I ran the 1320 leg, which was 3/4 of a mile. Sam Bear had me clocked at Ohio State at 2:57, a very respectable time for 3/4. And I believe George ran a 4:09 or 4:10 mile. Bob Beretta out of New York. Bob was a 1:51. Mike Sable was a 49 quarter miler. We ran at Penn Relays, Florida Relays. Also at Allegheny, we put together a 4-mile relay team, which was a very unusual distance. And I think it was the Dogwood Relays at the University of Tennessee. I ended up running a 4:12-mile leg. The rest of the guys were better than my 4:12 at Allegheny. We ended up setting a national American record in the 4-mile relay. We set the American record again in the distance medley for junior colleges at the Florida Relays. The week that we were down there was our spring break. And Thursday afternoon, Sam Bear and Neil Cohen came out to where we were lounging at the Student Union. Sam and Neil were walking toward us with their heads down, zeroing in on me. They said, "Len, we need to talk to you. We have some sad news. We got a call from your dad." I thought at first, oh my God, something happened. They said, "Len, your grandmother died and your dad needs to talk to you, but we need to talk to you before you talk to your dad." This was Thursday, and we were competing on Friday and Saturday. Sam says, "You have to make up your mind whether you want to run tomorrow or not." I said, what kind of question is that? They said, Len, there's only one flight out of Gainesville, Florida tomorrow, Friday afternoon, and it's at 4 o'clock. If you miss that puddle jumper, Atlanta to Pittsburgh, you will miss your grandmother's funeral Saturday. And I said to them, what time's our race? They said 3 o'clock, 3:15, maybe 3:30 at the latest if it's running late. And I looked at them and I said, let's do it. Switch the order. I said, I'll run the half mile leadoff. Let Mike Sable from New York, and Mike just passed away a year ago. Mike will run the quarter. I think they were going to have George run the 3/4 and someone else run the mile because I don't think Bob could run past the half mile. He was a great guy, but he would have been gassed probably at the 1,000-yard mark. So I think they brought in one of the other guys. I think it was Tim Fry from Winchester, and George switched to my leg. I looked at them and they said, you know what that means? I said, I know what it means. Get Jay Bird. Jay Brown was our track manager from Winchester. I said, get Jay to have the van by the track. I will run my ass off. I will jump the fence, have my bag packed, and we'll be off to the airport. Needless to say, Matt, I ran my ass off. I think I ran 151 or whatever it was. Handed the baton off. We were in the lead by 3 yards. Didn't know what happened. Jumped the fence, got in the van, got to the little airport in Gainesville. They were just about to pull the steps up. I got my ticket, got on the plane, made it back to Pittsburgh. Didn't have any idea what happened. The girl that I was dating at the time picked me up at the airport, got me to the funeral home right before they closed the casket for the next day. Got back to my parents' house. It was 9 or 9:30 at night. The phone rings, and Coach Cumlin is on the phone. And every time I tell this story, I get emotional. He said to me, "Hang on." He said, "Len, the guys want to get on the phone. You got back okay?" I said, "Yep." He said, "They have something to tell you." And they go, "Get." They said, "Len, we have your gold medal. We set an American record in your grandma's honor." Sorry, Matt.
No, it's a great story. Take your time.
I was very emotional, as I am right now. But we set that American record, and that's the world to me. I don't tell that story very often because I do get emotional. When I was inducted into the Mercer County Hall of Fame back home, Western Pennsylvania, they induct 10 people every year. And usually it's basketball, football, very little from the track and field world. And I told that story the night of my induction. They have one guest speaker for the class. They don't allow everyone to speak because we'd be there past midnight with people telling stories and long in the tooth. And the older we get, the stories get longer. I told that story. I got a little emotional, not as emotional as I just did, but it's just a tribute to my grandma and the guys of what they meant to me, really coming together and doing something really great.
Yeah,
That's a great story, Len. Thank you for telling that. It's nice how it ties together your family, your heritage, your teammates, your whole career. Let's go back to the Allegheny winning streak. I look at it as compared to the great undefeated streaks in sports history like De La Salle high school football, made famous by the book and the movie. Who was the one tie?
I think it was Southwest Community College from Michigan, or it could have been Southwest Missouri. It was one of the two schools that was one of our rivals. That's a Sam Bear question. Sam could tell you at the drop of the hat. Sam knows times, distances, results better than anybody. And as we put together the reunion a couple of years ago, we were sitting around having a couple beers, and Sam was reciting stuff that only Sam would remember.
Another thing Sam talks about is the way recruiting at Allegheny worked. I'd like to hear from you what your memories are. Neil Cohen was a great recruiter. Sam Bear was a great coach and a teammate in the training. And Sam talks about how over time they asked the teammates to get involved in seeing how candidates would fit. You had great camaraderie among the teammates. You remember some of the stories with new people as they were considered to join the team?
Every class was better than the last, and every runner that came in was better. We were like the Oakland Raiders of college running. I heard the stories about Admiral with the ragged sweats, etc. And Allegheny, we had guys that came from Arkansas, came from different colleges, came from top programs that really were misfits for whatever reason. They didn't last long at the colleges they were last, but they ended up at Allegheny. Neil was the architect of the team of being able to find those guys, even other junior college athletes that would drop out of school. Neil would be on the phone. We were like the Dirty Dozen. We were a bunch of misfits that came together and formed the team. And then Neil, with his contacts at Adidas, and then it was Nike. We had sweats, shoes, sweatshirts, everything that you could dream of, complete opposite of Edinburgh. Neil outfitted us. The guys at the beginning of the Allegheny cycle were good runners, but they weren't great runners. Then in the mid 70s until the end of the program, which was 78, all of a sudden we started getting national world class athletes. A lot of the guys were state champions. A lot of them came from programs in their countries, which were outstanding runners that were phenomenal. But Neil was able to recruit better and better runners. He was able to find diamonds in a rough. I was one of the only runners from Western Pennsylvania that competed for Allegheny. A lot of our runners came from Philadelphia. The majority of guys came from other states and other countries. I felt a responsibility in many ways to Allegheny and to the state of Pennsylvania by being representative of being the best that I could be and representing my home state.
Let's get on to your career after all that success at university levels. You became quite an accomplished road runner, running with Carl Hatfield, Bill Rogers. How did you come to starting to run races longer than your 8 or 10 mile training limit?
After the 1 year at Clemson, the following fall, I had an emergency appendectomy that had my appendix out. I was on a training run at Clemson, wasn't feeling good, wasn't doing the best at school. I'll be the first to admit that. And the head coach and I really didn't see eye to eye. When I had my emergency appendix out, I found it as my get out of jail pass to get out and start a new life and go somewhere where I would be happier. Loved my teammates. That ended up going back to Western Pennsylvania after that. In 6 weeks after I had my appendix out, I entered into the international peace race in Youngstown, Ohio, where they had 17 countries coming. There was a 25K race, and I ended up running in the 10K race. I may have started running again maybe 2 weeks, 4 weeks off before that. I entered into the 10K race out of a gutsy call. I think someone bet me I couldn't do it. One of my training partners encouraged me, and I used to train with guys out of Sharon, Pennsylvania, Chris Carney, Joe Bear, Dave DeMacy, Tom coaches that ran with me, Alex Cassage from time to time, Tom Hermans, and some other guys. They were all going to run in the international peace race. So I put my hat in the ring, and the 25K and 10K started together, and then the 25K split off, and the 10K went the other way. To be very honest, Matt, to this day, I thought I was winning the 10K and had no idea that Larry Coy, who was an All American out of Baldwin Wallace, great runner, great friend, and to this day, we're in touch on Facebook with all the other runners that we stay in touch with. Larry won the race, and I didn't even know that he won the race. When I came in to the finish line, I'm holding up my arms like I was cutting the ribbon, and then I find out he was a minute or more ahead of me. and I felt like a complete ass after that. It was pretty funny that I didn't find out until afterwards that Larry was really the winner and a great runner, couldn't have lost to a better guy. And then a couple of years ago, I saw the International Peace Race website, and they were listing all the winners of the different races. And they started off with a year that was like 80 or 79. The first 10K was 78. So I told Ted Roop, Ted, the first 10K was in 78. Here's a photocopy of the newspaper results. They put the winner in at the Youngstown Vindicator as Larry McCoy, and it was Larry Coy.
By the time we publish this interview, Larry Splash McCoy's interview will be out there so people can hear his story right from him.
Larry's a great guy, great runner from Northeast Ohio. After that, Matt, my coaches came to me thinking about running and said, Len, you really need to get that 4-year degree. You have 2 years at Allegheny, you have a year in at Clemson. Why don't you just enroll at one of the nearby colleges? We're good friends with Bill Lennox at Slippery Rock, Coach Cohen, Coach Sam Bear, Paul Sanders, and Bill Motor. They're in my head saying, just take all your credits, enroll in Slippery Rock, and just finish up. I met Coach Lennox, liked him, found out that some of my academics at Clemson weren't the best and didn't all transfer. And my GPA wasn't good enough for me to be eligible from the get-go. I found out when I transferred in, Matt, that I would not be eligible until my senior year, and I would only have one semester to be able to compete, to be eligible. I have no desire to go back to college, but I found out I did have one semester of eligibility because of that left. But I ended up transferring to Slippery Rock, and I started my road running and training with a group of guys from Slippery Rock through Coach Lennox for the middle and long distance. I started running exhibition races at Slippery Rock and then outdoor road races. And I became pretty good at 5-milers and 10Ks. I surprised myself. And as I went along, I started knocking off some really good distance runners, which I had no idea that I had the ability to do. And I really ramped up my training. And thank God for some of those runners at Slippery Rock. I was getting up in the morning, running like I did at my high school senior year, another 5 or 7 miles like clockwork at 6 in the morning, and then going to the afternoon workout. Coach Lennox was very supportive of me helping and working with the middle and long distance runners. So when they won the national championship in 79, I actually helped coach unofficially as a volunteer the middle and long distance runners. The only thing that I wish is that I would have been able to have been part of the national championship officially competing for them that year. However, I was able to help work with them through training. They had great success. On the indoor track that year that I was not officially able to compete, I did set a field house record for the 1,000-yard, 2:12.8, which to this day would have been a school record if I would have been eligible. As I became eligible, we went 7-0 on indoor tracks. We went 4-0 on outdoor tracks my senior year. Indoor track, I remember running one meet where I won the mile. I ran a 4:16, and I beat one of your great IUP runners, Ed Phillips, in the mile. And I came back in the 2-mile, and I think the guy's name was Jordan from Edinburgh.
Brian Jordan.
Yeah, Brian Jordan. That same day, I ran 9:12 in the 2-mile. And we had 3 guys that were out that day for us, and we ended up beating Edinburgh and 2 other colleges. I was a double winner. Jim Stett was the 60-yard and 300-yard winner, and both of us had 4 wins among us, which helped. I think Edinburgh only had 13 points that day, and we had an astonishing 60 or 70 point, and we were undefeated. I surprised myself that 2-mile indoor race at Slippery Rock. There was a wall, if you remember, Matt, from running there, on your left cheek, that you on one of the corners, that I ended up thinking one day, I think I could run under 9 minutes for this and set a school record. I ended up running 9 minutes, .9. And the school record I have, it's retired now. I just missed getting under 9 minutes and I surprised myself. So when we went outdoors, I ran the 1500 meters, which I set a school record at. And then I set the 5,000-meter school record for Slippery Rock as well. I set that one at Penn Relays where I ran 14:25 and I ended up breaking the school record in the 1500 meter twice. Once at Slippery Rock 3:54, I ran 3:50 at the University of Akron Relays. Then for the PZAC, I got disqualified in the championship. I think I would have won the 1500 meter. I bumped our friend from IUP, Ed Phillips, on the last corner, Phipps, and I would have ran a 3:47, but I got DQ'd by the official. I saw the red flag go up. It was tight. I was trying to get space, and I think with my bad left arm, I may gave a little inside maneuver, which I probably should have been a little bit better at doing instead of bumping. But it was a jostling and it was a close knit race going into that final stretch. And I was so angry because I really wanted to run the 1500 meters at the national track meet, which that time would have qualified me for at that point. But I did come back and I don't think I was supposed to have run the 5,000. I told Coach Lennox, put me in the 5,000. And I ran it. I scored. I was exhausted from the 1500 qualifiers, semis, and finals. And I ended up going to nationals in the 5,000 meters. During that entire time, Matt, I started road racing outdoors at 10K and really became good at it. In the summer of 79, I had to serve an internship as part of my recreation management degree. I spoke to Coach Lennox, spoke to my advisor, Bruce Bolivar at Slippery Rock, who's still a professor and a chairperson of that department. Great guy. They said, what do you want to do? I said, I would really like to do it somewhere where I could train and kill two birds with one stone. The YMCA out in Colorado Springs has this high altitude training camp at Pikes Peak at the end of summer. This YMCA, which is a multi-million-dollar agency, which would give me everything I need to learn about the nonprofit world with hands-on experience. I wrote a letter to the YMCA administration, got accepted. I remember my dad coming down to Slippery Rock and bringing the letter to me, and I was studying in the library. He said, Len, you got accepted. I said, where? He said, the YMCA, you're going to be their intern. I said, great. I didn't know anybody in the world, but I ended up going to Colorado Springs, meeting Ted Castaneda, one of the great 10,000 meter runners of our time. And I met John Bramley, who was one of the great marathoners. Both guys were Olympic trial qualifiers, all Americans in college, and ended up training with them for the summer. And then going to the high altitude training camp at the end of summer, I got to meet Cree Kelly from Denver, who owned a couple of Fidippity running stores. And Ted and John introduced me to Cree, and they were going to Atlanta to run in the Peachtree Road Race. They were taking a team, I think, of 3 guys. One of the guys that was going with them got injured. And John and Ted recommended to Cree, who was the team organizer, you need to call Len Krichko. He'll probably do a great job. Cree came to camp, offered me the opportunity to run with Team Colorado. I think all 3 of us were in the top 35 runners for the 10K. And I ran one of my best races ever. That was one of my breakout races, Matt, for me realizing I had great potential to be able to do great things. I was invited to New Haven, Connecticut for the 20K. I finished 3rd. Then the following year in the 20K, I finished 3rd to Mike Roach and finished 11 seconds behind the New York City and Boston Marathon champ, Bill Rogers. And that really opened my eyes to say, holy smokes, you have some ability. Keep with it. I ran for Allegheny, Nike, and then Puma USA track team. Mike Roach recruited several of us to be part of Puma's USA middle distance and distance team. I ended up running road races around the country and then finishing off with us going out to LA before the '84 Olympics and being featured in some commercials for Puma Energizer. We were featured in Parade Magazine, and then two commercials to this day I've never seen, Matt. You're going to laugh. They woke us up and told us, the middle and long distance runners, we want you running up the hill or the mountain by the Hollywood sign at Hollywood Hills. And I said, great. What time are we running tomorrow morning? Bright and early. I said, what's bright and early? We'll pick you up at the hotel at 5. You'll be running at 6. We ended up running up that damn hill 10 or 12 times.
Oh,
With the
wow.
Hollywood sign in the and when you think about it, Matt, that was 2 or 3 in the morning, our time, East Coast time. Myself and the guys were exhausted. I think we had an hour or two break, and then they told us that we were going over to the LA Coliseum to shoot the rest of the commercial. And you're going to run the track. I said, okay, no big deal. Could we relax a little bit? They said, yep. And they said, but there's going to be one wrinkle to it, and we hope you guys don't mind. You're going to be running with a live, I think of Jeff Marins, who was from Cleveland, and another great runner, Jeff Marins. Jeff looked at me, and I said, Jeff, did they say a live puma? He said, I think that's what they said. We got there, and sure enough, Jack, whoever from Columbus, Ohio, was a zookeeper at San Diego during some of the time, brought this live puma, and they had buckets of raw meat. And I'm looking at the people from Puma, and I said, I'm really not so sure about this. And they said, don't worry about it. We have a 500-pound cable on the guy. It's one of these invisible lines. I go, you're out of your freaking minds. I said, we're going to run that track with that Puma. They said, oh, yeah, don't worry. It's going to be on the inside or outside. I can't remember what. Whatever lane it's going to be in, I'm going to be on the complete opposite. And if that thing gets loose, I'm over the bleachers and I'm getting the hell out of here. We were scared to death, man. And I don't know how many times we ran and they were throwing the meat out in front. They said, you look scared to death. I said, scared to death. I said, do you know how skinny our legs are? If they take, we're done. Our running career is over. And again, I don't know to this day. I think I'm going to double back with Mike Roach someday and ask him whatever happened to the footage, because I've never seen it to this, never could find it, hoping that it was on the internet, but I haven't seen it yet. But often wonder, and that's one of the funniest stories lifetime for me.
That is a great story. Let me ask you, from the beginning, you probably thought you were going to be the greatest basketball player. Then you became a national record holder in the 800,000 meters. Now you're on to longer distances. What were you best at? What was your best race?
After that fiasco of running for Allegheny, the 250 marathon, I got invited after Slippery Rock to run the city of Baltimore's marathon. And I ended up finishing 9th, and I did training a little bit more serious, and I ended up running 2:28. Then I ran Boston 2:24 only one time. Then I got this crazy idea that I could qualify for the Olympic trials in the marathon. The qualifying time was 2:19:50. So I talked to Cree Kelly, my network of guys, trying to figure out what I could do. They talked to me about getting into Grandma's Marathon. Much like Boston, it's a point-to-point, runs along the Great Lakes, and you finish in downtown Duluth, and it's flat. And I said, oh, great, right up my speed, middle distance runner, flat, talking my language. I ended up going to Duluth, and I really trained. And I was training 110, 120 miles a week, really putting in a lot of miles, running half-mile intervals, doing everything appropriately. Went there, had a great field of, I think, about 35 good runners, and started running the race, getting the splits from 5 to 10. I started getting a cramp around 14 to 15 miles. I remember walking, Matt, a little bit, and I don't know if it was 600 yards or 800 yards. I absolutely was walking, and I thought I was done. I'm going to be a DNF, not going to be able to finish. I'm going to have to get out of here. And I kept rubbing my stitch out of my side. And then one of the trucks came by with the splits. I looked up and I thought, oh my God, I'm still in contention. I could do this. I started running again, and the clock was supposed to have been at the 20-mile mark, never got there in time. I started feeling better and better. The 25-mile mark came, and I thought, oh my God, I seriously have a chance to do this. I gunned it and tried to run it. I don't even know what I did for the last 1.2 miles. I finished at 2:20:59, 1 minute and 9 off the qualifying for the Olympic trials for the marathon. So with that walking that I did and then running, I think I had the potential to be a 2:15 to 2:17 marathon or better, I think. And I had no idea, Matt, that I had that ability from the quarter mile, 880, all the ways up, to the marathon. One funny story, when I was at Clemson, we were running the Outdoor Atlantic Coast Championship, and George Crunkleton, who I consider, even though I wasn't officially on the team, one of my great teammates. And George, just a little bit of trivia, was born on February 5th. I was born on February 6th. Henry Aaron, the great baseball player, was born on February 5th. Babe Ruth was born on February 6th. I've teased George before that we were two of the greatest slippery rock athletes with great history. And I said, George, you could use this trivia about Babe Ruth and Henry Aaron and you and me and win some beers at your local beer garden or whatever else. But when George was talking about Nehemiah, and I never talked to him about that, I never knew that George had the possibility of going to the University of Maryland 30, 40 years later now, thinking about my encounter with the great Ronaldo Nehemiah, was that Clemson, we were hosting the Atlantic Coast Championship outdoor track meet, and I had just run the 1,500 meters. I ran the 2-mile relay. I think I ran the 8. I ran a whole bunch of events. The track coach came to me because one of the quarter milers had a hamstring pull during his race and said, Len, we have a problem. I said, what's the problem? So-and-so pulled his hamstring. I go, okay. And I'm naming off different middle distance runners to him. I said, so you, so-and-so. Len, they're spent. They can't go. We need you to lead off. I looked at him. I said, are you out of your mind? I said, I know I could run a quarter mile in 49, maybe 48 seconds at my best. These guys are 46 or better. You're talking about North Carolina. Maryland has the great Ronaldo Nehemiah leading off. We're going to get smoked. It ain't even going to be pretty. He goes, Len, you're one of the gutsiest runners we know. You could do it. He says, do you want to come out of blocks or do you want to run with a stand-up start? But I go, are you out of your freaking mind? I don't even know how to use blocks. I don't even know what blocks are. I know what to look at them. He goes, okay, so you're going to do a standing start. I'll start like I do in the half or 1,500 meters of time. I got to the starting line, and all my teammates at Clemson are looking at me, and I'm like, this is going to be ugly. Everyone, 8 lanes out, all being in blocks. Here's me standing up. The starter comes over to me, and I forget what lane we were. He says, time out. Comes to me and says, young man, do you want blocks? Are you really going to start this race standing up? I said, yes, sir. He goes, why aren't you coming out of blocks? I go, do you want a false start or do you want someone to trip or you want me to fall right on my ass? I said, it won't be pretty. Sir, I was just recruited last minute to do this. I'm going to do my best. He shook his head and said something to the effect, good luck, son. I held my own. I think I was 3 to 5 yards behind the great Ronaldo Nehemiah. Those take no offense. All I saw was asses. I think I ran probably my fastest 400, and I think we ended up, believe it or not, finishing in the middle of the pack, even with that disaster. We had a guy from Jamaica, a guy from South Carolina that was a character, and one other guy from New York, Eric Rucker. And I think Eric's cousin was the Rucker that played for the Cleveland Browns, was a wide receiver. And all I remember is those three guys running their asses off. But when George told you that story about Ronaldo Nehemiah, I wish I would have known that. And someday I will call George and share my story, unless he listens to this funny story. That's my grace with Ronaldo Nehemiah in my encounter of trying to race the great one. But George Crunkleton was a great runner. He could have competed at D1 level, no question in my mind. And later, when Bolt from Jamaica ran, I would always put on George's Facebook page, George, I wish you would have had a chance to run against Bolt back in the day, because I really think you could have gave him a race. George is one of the greatest runners, 100 meters, 200 meters of all time.
That's great stuff, Len. I think we could probably go on for a couple hours more talking about race stories of the times. But I think to get to know you, we really need to talk about your work with kids, youth, the Boys and Girls Clubs. Of all the amazing career you've had and success in your personal life, this is perhaps the most amazing thing. How did you get involved with Boys and Girls Clubs?
It started back during my growing up and playing basketball. I went to the local boys club, and my sisters went to the local girls club. With the boys club, I had to mature and grow up quickly, like any kid that goes to first grade. I was so intimidated by these 20 feet maple doors that opened the doors to the club that I gravitated to the library to open up a book and pretend like I was reading. And as I grew courage, I started making my way to the gym. One of the program directors, by the name of Ronnie St. Clair, took a liking to me. He saw me shooting hoops and said, "Hey, you're pretty good. You want to play in our league?" And I said, "Absolutely." I played with the guys. And then when I was going into junior high and high school, he put together an all-star team. Consisted of guys from Sharon, one guy from Farrell, Pennsylvania, great basketball school. Sharon was a great basketball school. A great guy from our high school that reminded me of Pistol Pete Maravich. His name was Tom Sinsich, and Tom was phenomenal with a basketball. He put me on this traveling basketball team, and it was a great honor for me to play on this team. We played tournaments in Cleveland and in Pittsburgh, and our team was so great. One of the guys went on to play for the Minnesota Vikings. One went on to play for the New York Yankees Farm League. One of them went on to become a dentist. One of them went on to be one of the best football coaches in Western Pennsylvania high school history. Then I became a Boys and Girls Club guy because I remembered the influence that Ronnie St. Clair paid to me and motivated me during those trying times. I always gravitated back to the Boys Club and saw what it did with my sisters for the Girls Club. Great programs, the great staff. I learned to swim at the Boys Club. It was such a great influence. And they had this loving spirit of building this safety net around children, inspiring them and growing them. I had all these great coaches in high school. I had the great guy from the Boys Club inspiring me. When I went to Clemson, I had an advisor, Dr. Jack Stevenson, who was very instrumental in recreation management. And then I had Bruce Bolivar and Coach Bill Lennox at Slippery Rock, and Coach Cohen and Coach Bear. All of them said, get into something that you're going to love and you're going to enjoy. The closest thing that I could find to nonprofit administration was recreation management. Every 2 weeks at the YMCA, I worked with their vice president, Merv Bennett. Murph had me shadow the CFO. He had me shadow the marketing person, special events person. I got to sit in at one or two board meetings, but I learned so much during that summer that I said, wow, I can really see myself doing this. And then I tried to figure out, where do I have the opportunity to do this? And then I started thinking about the boys club and what it meant to me. Along the way, as I started traveling, and I really thought I was going to be a coach at one point. And when I left Slippery Rock, before I got this nonprofit idea in my head solidified, Charlie Strong at the University of South Carolina called me. Hey, Len, I need someone to coach the middle and long distance. I've read about your success. Could you come down here and coach? And I said, absolutely. And I thought, oh, here we go. I'm going to be a college coach, maybe a high school coach in the future. Put the boys club thing on the back burner for now. So I went down there until I encountered the football coach at South Carolina, which was another blessing. And his name was Jim Carlin, and he was the head football coach. And Bill Motor and my dad took me down to Columbia when Charlie recruited me, and they had a van full of all my things. One of the guys that I met during the road racing circuit was by the name of Howard Grubbs, who was a great attorney. Howard invited me to stay with him for a couple of weeks until I got settled, and I took his offer up. Bill and my dad went down, and as we went into the athletic cafeteria in the athletic hall, I remember Bill going up trying to get some food. As you remember, those coaches' shorts were very short way back then. And a guy with a really tight sports shirt on, he probably should have been working out. He looked like he had probably drank a keg of beer, approached Bill and said, young man, what are you doing here? Bill said, I'm down here with one of the people who's coming to coach here. He goes, this cafeteria is for football players only, and all the other athletes are secondary. So I would recommend you go to the student union or somewhere else. Bill came back and said, damn, that guy wasn't too friendly. I said, who was that? He goes, I have no idea. I asked someone and they said, oh, that's the head coach. And he's the athletic director. I coached with Charlie. He did the sprints and jumps, and Stan King was the weight coach, the Olympic trials guy, in the discus, great guy. Telling them the story about, and they both came to South Carolina from Alabama. I was telling them the story about Jim Carlin, and they said, Len, stay away from him. He's the athletic director, and everything's football and football, but just stay away from him. Do yourself a favor, do us a favor. I didn't think anything of it. So Charlie's asking me to work with the kids, middle and long distance, which I'm doing in cross country. And then at nighttime, I'm working the phone down at the athletic department until about the third month of cross country season. And Jim Carlin knocks on the door, and I see him, and he had just fired the coach. And it's eluding me right now. Frank McGuire was the coach. No relation to the other. It was Dick McGuire, no relation to Al McGuire. But he had just fired Al McGuire, the basketball coach, who was a great coach, and people were in shock. So he comes in and he says, Coach, what are you doing? I said, I'm recruiting. I'm trying to build a first-class program. He goes, do you know what the number one sport here is at South Carolina? In a real Southern accent. And I'm thinking, I'm not dumb. I said, football. You know what the number two sport here is, South Carolina? I said, innocently, basketball. He said, wrong. And I'm like, oh, shit. He said, football. Do you know what the number three sport is? I said, football. And the next day, Charlie came in and we're having coffee. And I said, Charlie, I got to give you my notice at the end of the year, and I'm going to be moving on. I can't do this. You're doing a great job. The kids love you. They've never run so well. You're training with them. They're doing great. I said, I had a run in with coach. I told you not to talk to him. I said, Charlie, it's football and football. Good luck to you and Stan. If you could work wonders with your track program, and if it could continue, great for you. But I'm smarter and I know better that Coaching's probably not in my forte. So with that, I accepted a position with one of the running shoe companies as a promotional technical representative, moved to Connecticut, and I figured I could work for the running shoe company, go to graduate school, and I could continue my training, but I could focus in my graduate degree on doing this nonprofit work. So as relocating into Connecticut, and this is a strange story, Matt, and you're going to laugh. I met a guy in the parking lot with a Boston Red Sox hat on with a silver trout hanging out of it, the head and the tail. And I'm trying to unload my U-Haul, and I have this big ass couch. And he says, "Hey, you need some help with that?" I said, "Yes." His trout is wiggling, and he goes, "I'll give you a hand." I said, "Great. I need to pay you something for helping me. Can I buy you a beer or two, or what do you want?" He said, "I'll take a 6-pack or whatever the Boston beer was, like our Iron City back home. They had some beer which was nasty." And I said, "I'll buy it and I'll be by your place. Tell me your apartment number." So I went there. He opens the door. He already has a can of beer. The trout's shaking. And I said, "I didn't catch your name." He said, "My name's Mike Small." I said, "Mike, it's nice to meet you. What do you do for a living?" He said, "I'm the boys club director in town." I started laughing. He goes, "Do you know of it?" I said, "It probably saved my life." And I told him the story. He goes, "You look like a runner. Are you a runner?" I go, "Yep." He said, "So am I. I've run some marathons. My best, I've only run a 2:35." And I'm thinking, this guy knows what he's doing if he's running a 2:35 marathon. He says to me, "Len, I'm always looking for good volunteers." I said, "I'm starting this new job. I'm starting graduate school. I'm going to be helping out with the running program." He says, "Len, I really need your help. You understand the kids. You could be an influence to them." And I said, "Mike, what do you want me to do?" He said, "Could you join my board?" I said, "Absolutely not. I'm not a board volunteer." He said, "How about programs?" I said, "I'll do it." He said, "You know anything about basketball?" And my eyes lit up. "Absolutely." He says, "Could you work our summer basketball program? Being the scorekeeper, being an official." I said, "Absolutely, I'll do it." So, Matt, I started doing it. Then I started showing up the club a little bit early, talking to the kids, talking to them about their academics, talking about who they were. And then toward the end of the summer, he goes, "Len, you're going to have to put the whistle on again. Our referee just got hurt for the final. You got to do the final game with Jim Potter." I said, "Mike, Jim Potter is one of the top NCAA basketball officials in New England. I can't do this." He goes, "You played basketball. You told me that." And I said, "I know, but I come from Western Pennsylvania." He goes, "What the hell does that have to do with it?" I said, "Western Pennsylvania basketball is very physical. And if I don't see blood, I'm not going to be blowing the whistle off." He goes, "Just follow Jim's lead." I said, "I'm just telling you up front, I'm not one of those guys that blows the whistle a lot. And I'm going to let the guys play." We start the game. Jim Potter calls a timeout. He goes, "Len, you got to start blowing it." Later, he was inducted into the New England Hall of Fame. At the end of summer and my graduate studies coming to an end, Mike calls me, "Len, I want you to call Fred Kohler at Boys and Girls Club's headquarters in New York City. There's an opening for a job, and Fred is in charge of placing people, and I've recommended you." I said, "Mike, I don't know how to run a boys club." He said, "You're smarter than you think. You could do it." And I said, "Where's the job?" He said, "It's a little city outside of Boston. They need a director. I told Fred about you. All you have to do is call him." So I called, and Fred in New York is chomping on a cigar. And that's when, as back in the day, they brought in those dry cigars and would chomp on them. And Fred says to me, "Yeah, you were recommended by Mike Small," with a real heavy New York accent. "Did you happen to watch The college basketball game last night, Iona and somewhere, or St. John's and somebody. I go, oh yeah, that was a great game. What'd you think of it? And I told him what I thought. He goes, you know your basketball. I'm going to recommend you for this job outside of Boston. We have a very complicated system in placing people. Do you have a yellow legal pad? I said, yes, sir. He said, take down my name, Fred Kohler, Human Resources, Boys Club of America, 771 First Avenue, New York, right across from the United Nations. Send me a note and your resume. And I said, I thought you said it was a complicated system. You know how to put a stamp on an envelope? I said, yes, sir. And he called me in a week and said, Len, you have a scheduled interview in Hudson, Massachusetts on Sunday. Just go up there, talk to them, do everything that you can, and you should be good to go. I went up, met with the board. It was supposed to be an hour interview. It ended up being 3 hours. I got back home to Connecticut. The phone rings. The chairman of the board says, Len, we want to hire you as our executive director. So for the next 2 years, I ran the clubs in Hudson, Mass, got a promotion, went to Cleveland, Ohio for 10, and then ran the Boys and Girls Clubs in Detroit for 20 years. And everywhere I went, Matt, I was still involved with running. I helped out with our kids and staff with the Boston Marathon as volunteers, helped out with the Revco Marathon in Cleveland and in Detroit. I helped out with other events as I did in Cleveland with the Super Bowl, with Major League Baseball All-Star games. I was able to influence many kids, many circumstances, and it's been fun. It's been a great part of my life. But seeing kids succeed in life and becoming great people in their own careers, and then going on and serving in whatever capacity of their lives, and then getting those phone calls to this day from some of those kids that I worked with is more meaningful than anything in the world.
Len, let me ask you something about these decades across boys and girls clubs. Has it changed during your tenure? What's the future of that organization?
It has changed, Matt. It finally became Boys and Girls Clubs back in 1992. Finally, they're going into schools. They don't have so many standalone facilities as they did before with brick and mortar and high costs. They've done the smart thing of going in where the kids are. They're opening programs, running after school programs. They're growing, they're expanding, they're serving a great need and building those safety nets around kids and reaching those kids that maybe haven't been reached by others. So it's very much in demand, very much in need. And I can honestly say it's probably one of the best organizations in the United States or in throughout the world.
This has been great so far, Len. It's great to talk to you. Your story's far from over. There's going to be more history made, maybe by your girls, and certainly more life changing effects from all these kids that you continue to influence.
My real full-time job is coaching my two daughters. One daughter lives in Arizona and works in assisted living. And then I have a young daughter that's a junior in high school and quite the athlete coming up. She used to be a phenomenal runner and the older one as well, but they both gave up those sports. She is focused in on golf and is a great golfer and has several colleges looking at her for potentially a golf scholarship in the future. Happy to say she's probably the smartest one. And she's happy to tell me, Dad, I love golf because of two things. I compete against myself. And secondly, you can't use your voice during soccer, basketball, or running. Your voice is so loud that I used to be able to hear you across the fields, across the course. And on the golf course, you're not allowed to say a word. You have to be quiet during the entire time. So it's been fun watching her grow as a up and coming student athlete.
That's great.
Len, when did you end your official role with Boys and Girls Clubs, and what else are you doing now?
2017, I did step down after 30 some years of serving them. One of my great loves has circled back to me. Not only do I still mentor boys and girls clubs from staff around the country, and I'm a phone call or email away, I'm also helping a group that was started here in Detroit called the American Basketball Hall of Fame. A former Harlem Globetrotter, Lamont Robinson, from Northeast Ohio, and also has some roots in Jeanette, Pennsylvania. Lamont recruited me to help him with the American Basketball Hall of Fame. And we put in the sixth class this past June. We're going to put another induction class in with Magic Johnson and some other great ones next year. I'm helping Lamont raise the awareness of the American Basketball Hall of Fame, which is going to be parallel to the Naismith Hall of Fame. We're going to honor those that haven't been honored for high school, college, and post-collegiate basketball, and some of those that have been honored by Naismith. Our goal is to raise money and build a 30,000 or 50,000 square foot facility in Detroit that will be able to have a museum, will have a field house, and be able to have programs and mentoring for kids and for coaches. So my love of working with kids, working with boys and girls clubs, working with basketball is coming full circle. And I am so happy. Lamont was on the phone with me the other day talking about different nominees. And all I could tell you is it's a privilege and an honor to work with him and the board of the American Basketball Hall of Fame. And Lamont was one of those guys that I went after to play on a basketball team for 40 and older. And one of the guys that was a captain at Michigan State goes, Len, why would you want to do this? And I said, because I'm competitive and I still got game. He said, you are crazy. And another guy, this Division I coach up here, responded, I could hardly walk, let alone play basketball. But I tried, but it doesn't look like our team's going forward, Matt. But anyways, those are my loves going forward.
Len, you've had an amazing life. You're a cheerful and positive person. It's good to hear these stories. It's not always been easy. You talk with grace about the challenges, the injuries, the things that didn't go well, the uncertainty, things that were just bumps in the road as you manage your way around. It's a very inspiring story. I know you have lots of friends in running and the sports community. I'm sure a lot of them, if we can get this podcast to them, will make their day. It certainly made my day talking with you, Len.
Thank you, Matt. Always great to talk from someone from back home, Western Pennsylvania. Thank you, Matt.
I sincerely appreciate all your time, Len.
You're welcome, Matt. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed another episode of Running in the 70s. Voices, stories, and memories of athletes who were running in the 70s. Until next time, wherever you are, keep looking forward and don't forget to look back.